Welcome to HOA Storytime Central. The HOA wanted control, not safety. You are going to stop wasting your own time. That is what Laura Jones screamed at me while she jabbed her finger at the curb sign like it was evidence in a murder trial. The rule changed overnight, she said, and it was my job to magically know. Her whistle bounced on the lanyard around her neck. Wind whipped her gray windbreaker. I checked my watch because I had an event set up in 2 hours and this was eating my window. Laura is the Architectural Committee Chair for the Park Pass Ridge HOA Board here in Tacoma, Washington. She decides what flies and what does not, and right now she decided my friend dropping off groceries counted as a parking violation. I work as a community event staffer. I know how crowds move, how meetings run, and how deadlines slip when someone wastes your time on purpose. I also know when someone is making up rules to target me specifically. My friend parked in front of my townhouse for 6 minutes. Laura appeared with a clipboard wrapped in a clear plastic sleeve, a stopwatch, and a smile that could crack glass. She started a timer like a traffic cop and told me guest parking required a permit now. I asked when that rule passed. She said 2 weeks ago. I asked why I never got notice. She said the sign was updated and ignorance was not an excuse. The sign had been repainted, sure, but the old version said guest parking allowed up to 2 hours. The new version said permit required at all times. No transition period. No warning letter, just enforcement with a timer. Laura told me this was strike one. She said if my guests parked again without a permit, she would have them cited, clamped, or towed. She repeated it twice. I am calling management and I am going to be dramatic about it. She smiled when she said it. Then she leaned in close and added, I can fine you daily until you give up and you cry. She said it like she had done it before. I did not argue. I nodded and helped my friend carry the bags inside while Laura stood there timing us with her stopwatch. I am saving for a new truck. The HOA already drained me with a bogus landscaping fine last year that I could not fight because I did not have proof. This time I decided I would not let her bleed me dry. I started recording everything. I pulled my phone and opened the voice memo app. Every interaction with Laura went into a file. Every notice she left went into a folder. Every rule she cited got checked against the actual CC&R document the HOA filed with the county. I built a timeline packet with dates, receipts, permit confirmations with no readable text, and photos. I did not tell Laura I was doing it. I just smiled and said I would follow the rules. 2 days later, Laura left a notice on my door. It said my guests had parked illegally again and I owed a $100 fine plus a $20 processing fee. The notice included a photo of a car I did not recognize parked 3 houses down. I checked my security camera footage. That car never came near my house. I texted Laura and told her the mistake. She replied, "The fine stands. Appeal if you want." The appeal process required a written submission, a $50 filing fee, and a hearing slot that would not open for 6 weeks. Meanwhile, the fine would accrue interest at 2% per week. I called my neighbor, who works as a neighborhood security guard supervisor. His name is Ron. He has been dealing with Laura for 3 years. He told me she pressures neighbors to sign complaints and calls it community support. He said she once tried to get him fired for refusing to enforce a rule that did not exist. He offered to be a witness if I needed one. I said I might. He said he would keep his radio on. I submitted the appeal with my footage and a copy of the CC&R section that required photographic proof linked to the homeowner address. I paid the $50 fee. Laura sent back a 1-sentence denial. Insufficient evidence. The fine increased to $148. I checked my phone battery. 32%. I had been recording non-stop for 2 days and my charger was in my truck. I plugged in and waited. The next week, a tow truck showed up at 6 in the morning. I was getting ready for work. I heard the diesel engine and looked out the window. A wheel-lift truck was backing toward my friend's car, which was parked in the same spot as before. My friend had stayed over because we worked a late event together, and he did not want to drive home exhausted. I ran outside. Laura was standing on the sidewalk with her clipboard and her whistle. She blew it once when she saw me. The tow operator, a middle-aged guy with a beard and a high-visibility vest, stopped and looked at her. She told him to proceed. I told him my friend had a valid guest permit displayed on the dashboard. Laura said the permit was expired. I said it was issued 3 days ago and valid for 7. She said the new rule reduced guest permits to 72 hours and mine was over. I asked when that rule passed. She said last week. I asked for documentation. She held up a piece of paper with no readable text and said, "This is your documentation." The tow operator looked uncomfortable. He asked Laura if she had the signed authorization. She pulled a tow authorization slip from her clipboard and waved it in the air like it was a court order. He asked if the car was on private property or a public street. She hesitated. He pointed at the curb and said, "This is a public street." Laura said the HOA has jurisdiction. He said he needed to call his dispatcher. He pulled his phone and stepped away. Laura turned to me and said, "I am calling management and I am going to be dramatic about it." She said it exactly like before. I smiled and kept my phone recording in my pocket. The tow operator came back and told Laura his dispatcher said they cannot tow from a public street without a police request or a parking enforcement citation. Laura said she would get one. He said he would wait 15 minutes. Laura called someone. I heard her say, "We need a citation issued immediately." There was a pause. Then she said, "Fine, then authorize a private tow." Another pause. She hung up and told the operator to proceed. He shook his head and said his company does not do that. Laura said she would find another company. He said good luck and drove away. I did not correct her lie, because I wanted her to commit to it in public. I knew the rule required both HOA board approval and city parking enforcement for any tow from a public street. Laura had neither. She called 3 more companies while standing on the sidewalk. 2 said no. The third said they would send someone within the hour. I texted Ron and told him what was happening. He said he would swing by on his shift. An hour later, a flatbed tow truck arrived. This one had no company name on the door, just a magnetic sign that said private towing. The driver was younger, maybe mid-20s, wearing a baseball cap and a stained hoodie. He did not ask for authorization. He just started hooking the car. I stepped in front of him and said, "This is a public street and you need a police order." He said he was contracted by the HOA. I said the HOA does not have authority here. Laura walked up and said, "Yes, we do. I am calling management and I am going to be dramatic about it." She said it again. 3rd time. I filmed her saying it. Ron pulled up in his security vehicle. He got out and told the driver to stop. The driver ignored him. Ron stepped closer and said, "You are committing an unauthorized tow on a city street. That is theft." The driver stopped. Laura yelled at Ron to stay out of it. Ron said he was a witness and he was staying. Laura said she would have him fired again. Ron laughed and said, "You already tried that." The driver looked between them, then at me, then at Laura. He asked Laura if she had written authorization from the city. She said she did not need it. He unhooked the car and drove away. Laura stood there shaking. She told me this was not over. She said she would fine me for obstruction, for hosting unauthorized guests, for creating a disturbance, and for anything else she could think of. She said the fines would keep coming until I sold my house and left. Then she walked away. I checked my recording. Clean audio. Every threat, every lie, every repeat of her catchphrase. I sent the file to my laptop and backed it up twice. My neighbor across the street filmed the whole thing from his porch and posted it in the neighborhood group chat. Within an hour, 6 people messaged me asking if Laura was serious. I said yes. They said they had similar stories. I started collecting them. That afternoon, Laura sent a mass email to the neighborhood. It said I was violating community standards, creating safety hazards, and refusing to comply with lawful HOA directives. It said I would face escalating enforcement until compliance was achieved. It included a reminder that homeowners could be fined up to $500 per day for ongoing violations. She copied the entire board and the management company. I replied all with a polite correction and attached my appeal documentation. I did not mention the recordings yet. I wanted her to keep digging. The next day, Laura showed up at my door with 2 board members I had never met. She said they were conducting an inspection. I asked for notice. She said the CC&Rs allowed emergency inspections. I asked what the emergency was. She said ongoing non-compliance. I asked for specifics. She said I would receive a full report. I let them walk around my front yard for 5 minutes while I filmed from the doorway. They took photos of my trash cans, my mailbox, my doormat, and my porch light. Then they left. I got the report 2 days later. It cited me for an unapproved doormat color, a mailbox post that was 2 inches too tall, and a porch light that exceeded the brightness limit. Total fines, $300. I checked the rules. None of those limits existed. I called a lawyer. She said I had a strong case for harassment and selective enforcement. She said the unauthorized tow attempt was the smoking gun. She said I should file a complaint with the city and request a cease and desist from the management company. She also said I should attend the next board meeting and present my evidence publicly. I said I would. She said to bring copies for everyone and to stay calm no matter what Laura said. I said I could do that. If you want to see how this plays out, hit the like button and subscribe. The board meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday at 7 in the evening. I spent the week refining my timeline packet. I included every notice, every fine, every recorded threat, every witness statement from neighbors, and a summary of the CC&R violations Laura had committed. I printed 15 copies and put them in a folder. I also burned the recordings to a USB drive and labeled it evidence. I did not tell Laura I was coming. I wanted it to be a surprise. Thursday arrived. I showed up at the community center at 6:45. The meeting room was set up with a long table at the front and folding chairs for residents. About 20 people were already there. Laura was at the table with 4 other board members, shuffling papers and whispering. She saw me, and her face went tight. She said something to the board president, a retired accountant named Mark. He nodded and wrote something down. I sat in the second row and waited. The meeting started with routine business. Budget updates. Landscaping proposals. Someone complained about a broken gate. Mark asked if anyone had new business. I raised my hand. Laura said, "We are not hearing complaints tonight." Mark said, "Actually, we are." He nodded at me. I stood up and walked to the front, I handed out my timeline packets. Laura tried to interrupt. Mark told her to wait. I started talking. I laid it out clean. Unauthorized rule changes without notice. Fines issued for non-existent violations. An attempted TOW on a public street without legal authority. Harassment and threats recorded on audio. I played a 30-second clip of Laura saying, "I can fine you daily until you give up and you cry." The room went silent. One of the board members, a woman named Sarah, looked at Laura and said, "Is that true?" Laura said I was editing the audio. I offered to play the full 5-minute file. Sarah said that would not be necessary. Mark asked Laura if she had documentation for the new guest parking rule. Laura shuffled her clipboard. She said it was approved at an emergency session. Mark said there was no emergency session. Laura said it was an email vote. Sarah said there was no email vote. Laura said, "Well, I approved it." Mark said that is not how it works. I kept going. I explained that Laura had hired a private tow vendor to remove a car from a public street without city authorization. I said that constituted theft under Washington state law. I said I had filed a complaint with the Tacoma Police Department and received an incident number. I said the tow vendor had since been contacted by the city and warned that any future unauthorized tows would result in prosecution. Laura stood up and yelled, "You are lying." I pulled out a printed copy of the police report summary with no readable text and handed it to Mark. He read it. His face went pale. He asked Laura if she had contracted with a private tow company. She said yes. He asked if she had obtained city authorization. She said she did not need it. He said, "Yes, you do." She said the HOA handbook said otherwise. Sarah said, "Show me." Laura flipped through her clipboard. She could not find it. The room started buzzing. One neighbor stood up and said Laura had tried to fine him for painting his front door blue. Another said she had threatened to lien his property over a rosebush. A third said she had reported his daughter's car as abandoned when it was parked legally for 2 days. Mark raised his hand for quiet. He said the board would investigate all claims and issue a response within a week. Laura said that was not necessary. Mark said it absolutely was. Laura said, "I am calling management, and I am going to be dramatic about it." She said it again. 4th time. Someone in the back row laughed. Then someone else. Then half the room. Laura turned red. She grabbed her clipboard and walked out. The whistle swung wildly as she shoved the door open. Mark adjourned the meeting. He asked me to stay. I did. He said the board had not been aware of Laura's actions. He said they would open a formal investigation. He said all fines issued to me would be frozen pending review. He also said the board would consult with the management company and the HOA attorney. I said that was fair. Sarah apologized to me directly. She said Laura had been acting unilaterally for months and they had not caught it until now. I said I appreciated that. Mark said they would schedule a follow-up meeting within 2 weeks. I said I would be there. I went home and collapsed. My phone buzzed non-stop with messages from neighbors thanking me and sharing their own stories. Ron sent a thumbs-up emoji. My friend who got almost towed sent a 6-pack of beer. I cracked one open and reviewed the recording from the meeting. Everything was clean. Every denial. Every contradiction. Every laugh. I burned it to a second USB drive and mailed it to the management company with a cover letter requesting an emergency review of Laura's authority. 3 days later, I got a call from the management company. A woman named Diane introduced herself as the regional director. She said she had reviewed my complaint and the accompanying evidence. She said Laura had been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. She said all fines issued to me in the past 6 months would be voided and refunded. She said the guest parking rule change was unauthorized and would be rescinded. She said the board would issue a formal apology and a policy clarification to all homeowners. She also said Laura would not be involved in any future enforcement actions. I asked what that meant for her board position. Diane said that was up to the homeowners at the next election. I said thank you. The next week, Laura tried one more move. She hired a private process server to deliver a cease and desist letter to my door. The letter accused me of defamation, harassment, and interference with HOA business. It demanded I retract all statements, delete all recordings, and pay her $2,000 in emotional damages. It was signed by a lawyer I had never heard of. I forwarded it to my attorney. She laughed and said it was unenforceable and borderline frivolous. She said if Laura pushed it, we would countersue for malicious prosecution. I said let her push it. Laura did not push it. 2 weeks later, the follow-up board meeting happened. This time, 40 people showed up. Mark opened by summarizing the investigation. He said Laura had issued over 60 unauthorized fines in the past year. He said she had pressured neighbors to sign complaints by threatening them with enforcement. He said she had hired private vendors without board approval and used HOA funds to pay them. He said the management company had terminated her access to HOA accounts and recommended her removal from the board. He asked for a vote. The vote was unanimous. Laura was removed. The room erupted in applause. Sarah was appointed interim chair of the architectural committee. She said her first act would be to review and rescind all unauthorized rules. Another round of applause. Mark also announced that the city had issued a formal warning to the HOA about the unauthorized tow attempt. He said any future towing would require written authorization from both the board and the city parking enforcement office. He said the HOA would issue refunds to anyone who had been fined under Laura's unauthorized rules. He said the refund process would start immediately and checks would go out within 30 days. He asked me if I wanted to add anything. I said no. I had said everything I needed to say. After the meeting, 6 neighbors came up and thanked me personally. One of them said Laura had tried to fine her for leaving her trash cans out overnight. Another said Laura had threatened to report him to the city for an unapproved fence that was fully compliant. A third said Laura had told her that her car color was not neighborhood appropriate and she should consider repainting it. Every story was worse than the last. I gave them copies of my timeline packet and told them to file complaints with the management company. They said they would. Ron found me in the parking lot. He said, "You did good." I said, "I just showed up." He said, "That is all it takes sometimes." He said Laura had been running the committee like a personal fiefdom for 3 years and nobody had been able to stop her because she hid behind procedure and paperwork. He said I had forced her to commit everything in public and that was the key. I said I got lucky. He said luck is what you call preparation when it works out. We shook hands and he drove away. I went home and checked my bank account. The refund hit 2 weeks later, $426, every bogus fine I had paid or been threatened with, plus the $50 appeal fee, plus a $20 administrative adjustment for interest. I bought the truck I had been saving for. A used Tacoma with a clean title and a working air conditioning system. I parked it in front of my house in the same spot Laura had tried to tow my friend from. It felt good. The story did not end there. 2 months later, Laura tried to run for the board again. She showed up at the annual meeting with a speech prepared. She said she had been unfairly targeted and that I had manipulated the process. She said the board had overreacted and that her enforcement actions were legal and necessary. She said she wanted to restore order and discipline to the community. Nobody clapped. When the vote happened, she got 3 votes out of 67. Sarah was elected to the full Architectural Committee chair position with 59 votes. Laura left before the results were announced. I never saw her at another meeting. But the real payoff came 3 months later. The management company finished its full audit of Laura's actions. They found that she had contracted with the same private tow vendor 4 times in 6 months. They found that the vendor had towed 7 cars from public streets without authorization. They found that Laura had received a $20 kickback for every tow. They found that she had deposited the kickbacks into her personal account and never disclosed them to the board. The management company filed a report with the Washington State Attorney General's office. The AG opened an investigation. Laura was charged with theft and misuse of HOA authority. She pleaded no contest and was sentenced to 2 years of probation, a $5,000 fine, and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board in Washington. The tow vendor lost its business license. The HOA issued a written reversal from management with a real citation refund to everyone who had been towed under Laura's scheme. 7 families got their money back. The board also adopted a new enforcement policy requiring documented violations, photographic evidence, written warnings, and city coordination before any tow. The policy was posted on the website and mailed to every homeowner. It has been in place for a year now. No issues. I still live in the same townhouse. My friends park in front whenever they visit. I display a guest permit on the dashboard out of habit, but nobody checks anymore. Ron still patrols the neighborhood. He waves when he drives by. Sarah runs the architectural committee with actual fairness. She approved my doormat, my mailbox, and my porch light without a single comment. The neighborhood feels different now. Quieter. Less tense. People wave at each other again. One afternoon, I was outside washing my truck when a woman I did not recognize walked up. She said she had just bought a townhouse 2 streets over. She said she heard about what happened with Laura and wanted to thank me. She said she almost did not buy here because of the HOA reputation, but after the changes, she felt safe moving in. I told her I was glad it worked out. She asked if I had any advice for dealing with HOA issues. I said, document everything, stay calm, and do not let them make it personal, even when it is. She thanked me and walked away. I went back to washing the truck. The final piece fell into place 6 months after the AG case closed. A local news station ran a segment on HOA abuse in Tacoma. They interviewed me, Ron, and 2 other neighbors who had been targeted by Laura. They showed clips of the meeting where she stormed out. They showed the police report summary. They showed the AG sentencing document. The segment aired during the evening news. My phone exploded with messages. 3 people from other neighborhoods reached out asking for help with their own HOA problems. I gave them the same advice I gave the woman at my truck. One of them won. One of them settled. One of them is still fighting. I ran into Laura once more, about 8 months after everything wrapped. I was at a hardware store in Tacoma, picking up screws for a bookshelf project. I turned down an aisle and there she was, standing in front of the paint section, staring at color samples. She saw me. I saw her. We both froze. She looked older. Tired. The whistle was gone. The clipboard was gone. She wore a plain jacket and jeans. For a second, I thought she might say something. She did not. She turned and walked away. I finished my shopping and left. That moment felt like the real end, not the board meeting, not the refund, not the news segment. Just two people in a hardware store, one who had tried to destroy the other over parking spaces, now reduced to awkward silence in the paint aisle. I do not know what Laura is doing now. I do not care. I got my truck. I got my refunds. I got my peace. That is enough. The HOA still exists. It still sends newsletters. It still has rules. But the rules are clear now. The enforcement is fair now. The board answers questions now. And if someone tries to pull what Laura pulled, there is a process in place to stop it fast. That is the real victory. Not revenge. Not punishment. Just a system that works the way it is supposed to. I still check my recordings sometimes, not because I need them, just because I want to remember what it felt like to be that angry and that powerless, and then to flip it. The moment I played that audio clip in the meeting and watched Laura's face collapse. The moment the board voted her out and the room erupted. The moment Ron shook my hand and said, "You did good." Those are the moments that matter. People ask me if I regret moving into an HOA neighborhood. I say no. I regret that Laura was allowed to run wild for so long. I regret that it took me getting targeted to force a change. But I do not regret fighting back. I do not regret documenting. I do not regret showing up. Because if I had not, Laura would still be out there, timer in hand, threatening the next person who parked wrong. The hardest part was not the confrontation. It was the waiting. Waiting for the tow truck, waiting for the board meeting, waiting for the investigation, waiting for the refund. Every day felt like I was holding my breath, hoping the system would work, hoping the evidence would be enough, hoping I had not missed something critical. And then it worked. The system worked. Not fast, not perfectly. But it worked. I think about the other neighbors Laura targeted. The ones who paid the fines and moved on. The ones who sold their houses and left. The ones who are still fighting smaller battles with smaller Lauras in smaller HOAs. I think about how close I came to being one of them. One missed recording. One lost receipt. One moment of doubt. That is all it would have taken for Laura to win. But she did not win. And that matters. Not just for me. For everyone who came after. For the woman who bought the townhouse 2 streets over. For the neighbors who got their refunds. For the next person who gets targeted and knows there is a way out. That is the legacy. Not the drama. Not the YouTube comments. Not the news segment. The legacy is the rule change. The policy update. The written process that stops the next Laura before she starts. I still see the tow truck sometimes, not the private vendor Laura hired, a legitimate city-contracted operator doing legal work. I see it hooking abandoned cars and expired plate violations. I see it following the rules. And every time, I remember the moment that first driver called his dispatcher and walked away. That was the moment I knew I had a chance. That was the moment the system started to bend in my direction. One honest worker who refused to participate in a scam. That is all it took to start the collapse. The HOA froze enforcement pending a policy rewrite. That sentence is in the official board minutes from the emergency meeting they held the week after I presented my evidence. It is also in the newsletter they sent to every homeowner. It is public record now. Frozen enforcement. No more surprise rules. No more overnight changes. No more timers and clipboards and whistles. Just a pause while they figured out how to do it right. And Laura. Laura was outvoted so hard the room laughed. That is the sentence I replay the most. Not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. The room laughed because Laura had become a punchline. The board president. The rule enforcer. The timer queen. Reduced to a joke in the span of 30 seconds. And she knew it. That is why she left. Not because she was voted out, but because she was laughed out. The kickback scheme was the detail that made the news. $20 per tow. $140 over 7 cars. Petty theft on a scale so small it almost felt insulting. But that is how these things work. Not grand conspiracies. Just small corruptions compounding over time until someone notices and pulls the thread. I pulled the thread. The thread unraveled. The whole sweater came apart. I got a letter from the AG's office 6 months after Laura's sentencing. It thanked me for my cooperation and said my evidence had been instrumental in securing the conviction. It said the case had prompted a review of HOA enforcement practices statewide. It said new guidelines were being drafted to prevent similar abuses. It said I should be proud. I filed the letter in the same folder as the timeline packet. Then I closed the folder and put it on a shelf. I do not look at it often, but I know it is there. The truck is still parked in the same spot. Same curb, same street, same place Laura tried to tow it from. I park there on purpose now. Not to make a point, just because I can. Because the rules say I can. Because nobody is standing there with a timer anymore. Because it is my spot and I earned it. Ron retired last year. He moved to Spokane to be closer to his grandkids. We text sometimes. He sends photos of lakes and hiking trails. I send photos of the neighborhood. He asks if Laura ever came back. I say no. He says good. I agree. Sarah is still the architectural committee chair. She runs it the way it should have been run from the start. Clear rules. Fair enforcement. No surprises. She approved a fence repair for my neighbor last month without a single question. She approved a mailbox replacement for another neighbor the same day. She does her job, and then she goes home. That is how it should be. I think about what would have happened if I had not recorded that first interaction. If I had not saved the notices. If I had not built the timeline. If I had not shown up to the meeting. Laura would still be there, still enforcing, still threatening, still collecting kickbacks. And I would still be paying fines for violations that did not exist. That is the alternate timeline. That is the one I avoided by staying calm and keeping my phone charged. The neighborhood group chat is still active. People post about lost pets and garage sales and noise complaints. Nobody posts about Laura anymore. Her name has faded. The drama is over. The story is old news. And that is exactly how it should be. The story ended. Life moved on. The system corrected itself. The bad actor was removed. The rules were fixed. The refunds were issued. Justice, in its slow and bureaucratic way, was served. I still work as a community event staffer. I still know how deadlines slip. I still know how meetings run. And I still know how to document everything. Because the next Laura is out there somewhere. Running a different committee in a different HOA in a different city. And the next person she targets might not know how to fight back. But maybe they will read this story. Maybe they will remember the timeline packet. The recordings. The board meeting. The refund. Maybe they will realize they have options. That is why I told it. Not for revenge. Not for fame. For the next person who gets a clipboard shoved in their face and a timer started on their guest. That is the lesson. Not that HOAs are evil, not that all board members are corrupt, but that power, even tiny power over parking spaces and doormats, can corrupt tiny people in tiny ways. And those tiny corruptions add up to real harm. Real stress. Real money. Real consequences. And the only way to stop it is to document, to stay calm, and to show up. That is it. That is the whole strategy. It worked for me. It can work for anyone. The sun is setting now. The street is quiet. My truck is parked. My doormat is the wrong color according to a rule that no longer exists. My mailbox is 2 inches too tall according to a standard that was never real. My porch light is too bright according to a limit that Laura invented. And none of it matters anymore. Because the rules are fair now. And fair is all I ever wanted. I will see you in the next HOA story.